Three of the largest passenger airplanes ever built, each nearly the size of a small building, ended up in the fleet of an airline that never actually planned to buy them. Not because of a bold expansion strategy, not because of record-breaking demand, but because of a failed deal, the financial collapse of the original buyer, and negotiations where saying no turned out to be more expensive than saying yes. Today, we're breaking down how all Nippon Airways, ANA, ended up with 3 Airbus A380's it didn't really need, and why those aircraft were already too far along to simply cancel. At first glance, this looks like a strange fleet decision. Airlines normally plan aircraft orders years in advance, carefully matching capacity to routes using precise economic models. You don't just accidentally acquire the largest airliner in the world. And yet, that's almost exactly what happened here. To understand how, we need to start with a different airline, a risky order, and a program that was already running out of time. To understand why this story with those 3 aircraft was even possible, we need to look at the Airbus A380 itself, and at how the aviation market changed around it. When the A380 was designed, the logic was simple. Major hubs were becoming overcrowded, airport slots were scarce, and the future seemed to belong to maximum capacity aircraft. One flight carrying 500+ passengers looked better than 2 flights on smaller planes. On paper, the idea made sense. And for a while, it actually worked. But at the same time, new generations of long-haul twin-engine aircraft began to appear. More fuel-efficient, more flexible, and cheaper to operate. These airplanes made it possible to fly directly between cities, bypassing massive transfer hubs altogether. Instead of the traditional hub-to-hub model, the industry began shifting toward a point-to-point approach. It was more convenient for passengers, and less risky for airlines. Filling 250 seats is far easier than filling 500. A very large aircraft only makes sense when it's nearly full. As load factors drop, the cost per seat rises sharply. Fuel, maintenance, crew, airport fees. None of these scale down with passenger numbers. The A380 does not like half-empty flights. It needs a steady, predictable, high-volume stream of passengers. As a result, orders for the A380 began to decline. Some airlines delayed deliveries. Others revised their fleet plans entirely. The production line kept running, but the backlog of future orders grew thinner and thinner. For the manufacturer, this created a difficult situation. The aircraft had already been developed, the factory was set up, supply chains were active. But new customers were becoming rare. And here's the key point. Building a large airliner is a long process. Years pass between signing a contract and delivering a finished aircraft. That means even if a customer starts struggling financially, the airplane may already be well into production. Fuselage sections assembled, wings built, components ordered. Stopping midway through means losses measured in millions. That's exactly the stage those 3 A380s were in. They weren't just an idea anymore. They were almost airplanes. Built with a specific configuration, for a specific customer, using resources that had already been spent. And when the market for the A380 began to shrink, while finished aircraft were still moving through the production cycle, the question stopped being whether to sell, and became, who can we urgently sell them to? And very soon, it became clear that the original buyer of these giants would not be the one who ultimately received them. The original customer for those 3 A380's was not ANA. It was a Japanese airline called Skymark Airlines, a relatively small carrier focused mainly on the domestic market. And at first glance, ordering the largest passenger aircraft in the world looked strange. Big airplanes are usually bought by major network carriers with global hubs, massive transfer traffic, and long-haul international routes. Skymark had none of that. What it did have, however, were ambitions. The plan was bold: grow fast, expand aggressively, launch long-haul routes, offer a premium product, and immediately announce itself on the global stage. In that context, ordering the A380 was a statement, a way of saying, we're playing in the big leagues now. The problem is that large aircraft require not only a big vision, but also a very strong financial cushion. Contracts for aircraft of this size are structured in stages. The buyer makes advance payments, intermediate payments, and final payments before delivery. The process is spread out over time. but the amounts involved are significant at every step. And if, at any point, the company loses financial stability, the entire chain starts to break. That is exactly what happened. Costs were rising. Revenues couldn't keep up. The strategy demanded capital that simply wasn't there. Skymark began falling behind on payments. Negotiations became more difficult. Contract penalties were also substantial. Because for the manufacturer, a failed delivery isn't just an inconvenience, it's a direct financial loss. Production slots, components, the work of thousands of people, logistics, everything is already committed. This is an important point that's often misunderstood. When people say the order was cancelled, it sounds like someone just pressed a button. In reality, it's a long legal and financial conflict. The manufacturer tries to preserve the deal. The buyer tries to renegotiate the terms. Both sides bargain, run the numbers, threaten legal action, and offer compromises. But when the money isn't there, the math eventually wins. At a certain point, it became clear that Skymark would not be able to take delivery of the A380’s, and by then, the aircraft were far beyond the drawing board. Parts had been manufactured, major assemblies completed, suppliers paid. It's like constructing a skyscraper for a specific tenant and losing them when the building is already halfway up. And this is where a technical issue appears that viewers rarely hear about. Large airliners are not universal by default. They are configured for a specific customer at the factory. Cabin layouts, galleys, crew rest areas, wiring routes, software systems, even the placement of equipment, all of it can differ. Reworking an aircraft for a new customer takes time and costs money. And the larger the aircraft, the more expensive that rework becomes. So Airbus found itself in a situation where it had nearly completed super jumbos, but no buyer waiting in line. And there was no line anymore. By that point, the A380 market had cooled significantly. Most airlines had either already ruled out the type or made a clear decision not to take it. Selling these aircraft from scratch to a new customer would have meant years of new negotiations and changes to specifications. And production cycles don't like pauses. So what do you do in that situation? You don't look for the perfect buyer. You look for the most realistic one. Someone you already have a business relationship with. Someone who is already negotiating other aircraft orders. Someone where a large package deal can be assembled, with the problematic aircraft becoming part of a broader agreement. And that's exactly when AENA re-enters the picture. Not as the original customer, but as a party to a completely different set of negotiations that suddenly take an unexpected turn. At this point, it's important to understand how major aviation deals actually work. They are almost never a simple 3 aircraft at list price transaction. Large carriers negotiate complex packages, dozens of aircraft, multiple models, delivery schedules spanning years, service contracts, crew training, spare parts, technical support, and most importantly, custom pricing. Sometimes the final price differs from the catalogue price by tens of %. But those discounts don't appear out of nowhere. They are tied to conditions. AENA was already engaged in exactly this kind of negotiation with Airbus for other aircraft types, smaller, more versatile models that actually fit its fleet strategy. Negotiations at this scale are a balance of interests. The manufacturer wants to secure a major customer. The airline wants the best possible terms. And this is where Airbus gained an additional factor: 3 nearly finished A380’s without a buyer. From a negotiation standpoint, the combination is obvious. If a customer agrees to take aircraft that are difficult to sell, they can receive better terms on the core order, not as an official requirement, but as an economic incentive. In a deal worth billions, even a few percentage points in discounts can mean hundreds of millions. Against that backdrop, adding 3 large aircraft no longer looks absurd. It becomes part of the overall math. From the outside, this doesn't look like an ultimatum. No one says, take them or walk away. It works more subtly than that. Better delivery slots, better financial terms, better support packages. But the package only works in full when the deal is complete. In negotiations like this, every element is connected to the others. Now let's look at the situation from AENA's side. They never planned to operate the A380 as a core part of their fleet. 3 aircraft is not a fleet. It's an exception. and exceptions are expensive. They require separate simulators or training programs, separate maintenance procedures, separate spare parts inventories, and separate engineering certifications. Airlines usually avoid such small subfleets precisely because of this operational complexity. So the decision looked something like this. Either keep a perfectly clean fleet plan, but accept worse terms on a massive overall deal, or make a strategic compromise and secure a far more favorable contract as a whole. In the long run, the second option could be more rational, even if certain aircraft were not desirable on their own. ANA agreed, and at that moment, the manufacturer's problem became the operator's problem, because buying an aircraft is only the beginning. The hardest question comes immediately after. Where do you put it so it doesn't turn into a financial burden? And the answer required a very unconventional route decision. So ANA ended up with 3 of the largest passenger aircraft in the world, and now the key question was no longer why, but how do we live with this? Keeping them within the regular route network would have been inefficient. The A380 requires very specific conditions: consistently high demand, slot-constrained airports, and routes where passenger volume matters more than flight frequency. Without that, the math simply doesn't work. They started with a simple calculation. Where is there a constant, predictable, high-density flow of passengers from Japan in a single direction? Year-round? The answer was Hawaii. The Tokyo to Honolulu route has long been one of the most popular leisure destinations. Demand there isn't just high, it's repeatable and highly predictable, exactly what a large aircraft needs. Instead of spreading the 3 A380's across multiple routes, ANA concentrated them on a single one. That simplified everything: crew training, maintenance, spare parts, and schedule planning. The aircraft operated as a small, dedicated subfleet with a clear mission: less chaos, more control. Then came another move, this time not technical, but marketing-driven. Instead of treating the A380 as a forced asset, ANA turned it into a signature feature of the route: special sea turtle liveries, themed branding, and an emphasis on the vacation experience of the flight. The aircraft became part of the journey itself, not just a means of transportation. In the end, the resolution was unexpectedly effective. Aircraft that entered the fleet because of a failed contract and complex negotiations were given a clear role and a working economic model. This was not the original strategy, but it became a viable solution. In large-scale aviation, this happens more often than it seems. Sometimes fleets are shaped not only by planning, but by the consequences of other people's mistakes and the hard math of high-stakes negotiations. And the story of these 3 A380's is exactly that kind of case.